Next, we will proceed with the cutting and installation of the grid board and the lining fabric. Let's start with the cutting. First, cut the grid board. I will demonstrate the method using the front piece as an example. Lay the fabric piece flat on the grid board first. For efficient use, it is recommended to start from the edge. Then, use a thread along the edge to secure a circle slightly inside. You can use any color of yarn here. Take a long tail of yarn. Thread it through the needle. And leave a little yarn tail to start. Make sure the fabric piece is laid flat and stretched out as much as possible. After completing, tie the beginning and ending yarn tails in a double knot for secure fixing. The remaining strands can be trimmed shorter. Once that's done, move on to cutting downwards. Here, cut along the edge to remove the grid board. Pay attention not to cut the fabric while trimming. You can cut a little beside the fabric. After finishing, take the fabric piece off. Move along the edge of the grid board and come in by 0.5 centimeters distance. Cut around in a circle. After completion, compare the workpiece. Then trim according to the actual situation. as long as the grid board is slightly smaller than the fabric overall. Then compare it with the grid board again. Then cut an identical grid board. Next, cut the lining fabric. Here, compare it with the fabric piece. Place the workpiece on top of the lining fabric. Here, the side of the lining fabric with the fuzzy side is at the back. Then use a water-soluble pen to draw the outline. The fabric piece should be laid flat and stretched out. Here, you can use heavy objects, or use clips to secure a few points, to prevent the workpiece from moving. If there's a mistake in the drawing, you can wipe it off with a damp cloth or wet wipes. After finishing, cut along the marked lines. Here, you need to cut 2 identical pieces of lining fabric. The base piece grid board is made by joining together 2 pieces. First, cut 1 piece according to the fabric piece. Here, cut from the longest part of the grid board. At the same time, cut a little beyond half of the workpiece, or to about 2/3 of the workpiece's position. When cutting, the grid board should be slightly bigger than the fabric. Then, move in about 0.5 centimeters from the edge. At the same time, trim the curves on both sides. Here, the curve needs to be symmetrical. After completing, match it to cut out the second piece corresponding to the first one. Once the cutting is done, proceed with joining together. First, check the overlapping area of the 2 grid boards against the fabric piece. Then use stitch markers. Mark and secure the 4 corners positions. Next, use the working yarn from the main piece. Sew a few stitches in the overlapping area to secure it. For this middle area, you can also sew a few stitches to make it more secure. That concludes the explanation of the base piece grid board section. Trim the lining fabric along the edges of the fabric piece. When drawing lines, just adjust the curves on both sides. Everyone, go ahead and complete this step. This completes the explanation of the grid board and lining fabric cutting sections. Next, we'll move on to sewing the grid board and lining fabric together. Start by sewing the grid board. Here, I'll demonstrate using the front piece as an example. Place the grid board on the wrong side of the fabric piece first. To make sewing easier, roughly secure the grid board to the fabric piece. You can also use clips to hold them in place. After that, use the yarn for crocheting the edging. For convenience while watching, I'll demonstrate with a different color. Pick up stitches from the wrong side of the fabric, and sew it to the grid board. Start by taking a long tail of yarn. Start from any position. Be careful not to pick up stitches on the right side. Leave a little yarn tail at the beginning. There's no specific requirement for the gaps while sewing, just make sure it's sewn securely. Finally, thread the needle through next to the starting tail. Then tie these two tails in a knot. You can tie a few more knots for extra security. Trim any remaining tails afterward. That's how you attach the grid board. Next, we'll attach the lining fabric. Place the lining with the fuzzy side facing outwards. Then put it on top of the grid board. To make sewing easier, you can use thin thread or clips to secure it in place first. Thread the needle with your chosen yarn. Here, I'll use a random color of thread for demonstration purposes. Find a few corresponding points and secure them. Everyone can follow this method to start securing. For the next step, switch to sewing thread. Take a length of thread, insert it into a thin needle. If you want it to be more secure, align the beginning and ending of the thread. Sew with 2 strands for added strength. Fold the edge of the lining fabric inward slightly. Then sew the crease to the wrong side of the fabric piece. There's no specific requirement for the sewing method, just make sure it's secure. Start by leaving a little yarn tail. If you run out of thread while sewing, you can tie a knot and join the yarn. If you were sewing with 2 strands before, thread the needle first. Then tie a knot with the previous tail. Continue sewing from there. The yarn tails will be dealt with later. When you reach the starting yarn tail position, tie the 2 tails together. Trim any remaining tails. Then use a crochet hook or sewing needle to hide the thread inside the fabric. You can weave in the ends a few more times for security. Use a crochet hook or a sewing needle to hide the remaining yarn tails inside the fabric. That concludes the explanation of how to install the lining. Next, follow the same method. to attach the grid board and lining fabric to the back piece and the base piece. When sewing the grid board onto the back piece, use the yarn from the edging. For the base piece, use the crocheting yarn from the main piece. After completing these steps, assemble the 3 fabric pieces together. Start by sewing and securing the front piece to the base piece. Place the 2 fabric pieces with the right sides facing out. Then align the ends and the bottom area. Secure a few points with yarn or stitch markers. I've already secured them here. After that, use the crocheting yarn from the base piece's main piece. Cut about 1 meter of it. Thread it through a sewing needle. You can start sewing from one end, or begin from the center and work towards both ends. At the bottom piece, pick up the edge with the chain stitches. Insert the needle. On the front piece, pick above the single crochet. Through the horizontal bar of the stitch, that is, from before. The half loop that remains after crocheting the slip stitch, along with the small strand below. Insert the needle through it. Sew to join the pieces together. Leave a little yarn tail at the start. To make it secure, pass the needle through the same spot one more time. Then continue by picking up the chain stitches on the edge of the base piece and the 2 strands above the single crochet on the front piece. Match and sew them together. While sewing, place the yarn tail on top and hide it as you go. Here, the stitch count of the 2 pieces doesn't align perfectly. When sewing, pick a roughly corresponding position to insert the needle. As long as the edges are aligned and flat after sewing, that's fine. If the yarn runs out during the process, tie a knot on the wrong side and join the new yarn. The last stitch position needs to be sewn twice. Hide the final yarn tail inside the fabric. You can weave in a few more stitches if you'd like. This way, the front piece and base piece are assembled together. Next, follow the same method to assemble the back piece with the base piece. Afterward, make and attach the remaining parts. Start by crocheting the opening piece. Once it's done, sew the two pieces together at the corresponding positions. Then attach the zipper to the opening position. Next, crochet the strap. After completing it, attach the strap to both ends of the base piece. Then install the opening piece in the indented area. Finally, make the buckle strap, and attach the magnetic clasps. Let's start by crocheting the opening piece. There are 2 pieces in total. The method is the same for both. Start with a foundation chain, and crochet the corresponding number of chain stitches. In my swatch, the stitch count is smaller. For specifics, everyone refer to the chart. After completing it, start from the 3rd stitch from the end. Pick the back ridge of this chain stitch, and insert the hook. From now on, only pick the back ridges. Work a double crochet into each stitch correspondingly. When you finish with the last back ridge of the chain stitch, row 1 is completed. Next, move on to row 2. Start with 1 chain as your turning chain. Then turn over, pick up the stitches below and work a half double crochet into each stitch correspondingly. When you finish with the last stitch, skip the chain stitch position. This completes row 2. Now continue to row 3. Start with 2 chains as your turning chains. Turn over. Then pick up the stitches and work 7 double crochets correspondingly. After completing it, leave the remaining stitches unworked. This completes row 3. Leave a yarn tail of about 20 centimeters and cut the yarn. Hide the starting yarn tail on the wrong side of the fabric. This completes one opening fabric piece. Make another opening fabric piece using the same method. Once done, sew together the last rows of both pieces. I'll demonstrate with this swatch. Place row 1 of the fabric piece with the right side facing up. Then thread the reserved yarn tail into a sewing needle. Locate row 2 of the other fabric piece. Count 7 stitches in from the edge. Insert the needle into the corresponding stitch. At the starting position, sew once again for extra security. Then follow the whip stitch method. Pick up and sew together the stitches from both fabric pieces correspondingly. For the chain spaces, insert the needle under 2 strands of the edge and sew once. Hide the final yarn tail on the wrong side. You can weave in a few more stitches if needed. Sew the other side using the same method. Complete this step. That's it for the explanation of the opening piece. Next, let's attach the zipper. Place the zipper at the opening position of the fabric piece. Then use stitch markers or a piece of yarn to roughly secure it in a few spots. Here, I've already secured it. Now, use the same yarn as the opening piece and take a strand to sew the zipper on. For convenience while watching, I'll demonstrate with a different color. Take a length of yarn, about 3 times the length of the opening. You can make it a little longer if needed. Here, you can use the entire strand for sewing, or you can separate the strands. Split it in half, more or less. Pull out one strand at a time. Thread the yarn through your needle. Now start by sewing one side first. Begin by securing one end in place. Then sew by matching up the corresponding positions of the opening edge and the zipper. Also secure a few stitches at the tail end. Finally, hide the yarn tail inside the fabric. You can weave in a few more stitches if you prefer. Once one side is sewn, trim the excess thread. Sew the other side using the same method. After completing this step, set it aside for now. Next, we will crochet the strap. It has 2 layers. I'll call the side with the pattern the first layer. The side underneath is the second layer. Start by crocheting the 2 layers separately, then join them together after completion. Let's begin with the first layer. We will use one new stitch technique, the bobble stitch with 3 double crochets. Please watch as I demonstrate. First, cast on and crochet 10 chain stitches. Then form a circle with the chain stitches. Locate the first chain stitch position. Pick up the top strand of the chain. Work 1 slip stitch to join. Be mindful not to twist the chain stitches here. This will form a flat circle like this. Next, make 3 turning chains as your turning chain. Pick up the loop from the circle below. Crochet 10 double crochets. Hide the yarn tail of the cast on as you crochet. After completing this, I consider it as one group. Move on to crochet the second group next. Start with 10 chain stitches. Then find the first stitch. Pick up the strand above the braid. Work 1 slip stitch to join. Again, be careful not to twist the chain stitches here. After completing, make 3 turning chains as your turning chain. Here you need to connect with the loop from the cast on of the first group on the left. Work 1 slip stitch to secure it. Once done, turn your work. Pick up the loop from the chain stitches on the left. Crochet 10 double crochets. This completes the second group. Next, work on the third group. The method is exactly the same as for the second group. First, crochet 10 chain stitches. Then slip stitch in the first stitch. After that, make 3 turning chains as your turning chain. Slip stitch into the chain loop of the second group to secure it. Then turn your work. Pick up the chain loop on the left and crochet 10 double crochets. This completes the third group. From now on, follow the methods of these two groups, and continue crocheting downward. Refer to the chart for the exact number of groups. After completing the last group, start crocheting the edging. I'll demonstrate the method using this small sample. First, make 1 chain stitch as a turning chain, then turn over the fabric. Pick up the stitch of the double crochet along the edge. Crochet 1 single crochet, then crochet 4 chain stitches as the interval. Adjacent to that, pick the 5th stitch from the right to left among these 10 double crochets. At this position, crochet 1 single crochet, make another interval of 4 chain stitches. Below, pick the chain circle of the adjacent group. Crochet a bobble stitch with 3 double crochets. Moving forward, I'll simply call it a puff stitch. First, work 3 incomplete double crochets. First, second, third. Now there are 4 loops on the hook. Yarn over and draw through all loops in once. Complete the bobble. Then crochet 4 chain stitches as the interval. Next, pick this circle and crochet 1 bobble. Afterward, make another interval of 4 chain stitches. Later, when you encounter a double crochet position, pick the 5th stitch from right to left. Make 1 single crochet. On either side of the single crochet, there are 4 chain stitch intervals. When you encounter a chain circle, pick the larger space and crochet 2 bobbles, with a 4 chain stitch interval between them. Then repeat this process. Continue crocheting downward. After finishing the last chain circle, crochet 5 chain stitches as an interval going down. Then pick the double crochet position next to the adjacent turning chain. Make 1 single crochet. Then crochet 4 chain stitches as an interval behind it. Next, skip 3 stitches. Make 1 single crochet. Here you are still working on the 5th stitch counted from right to left. Crochet 4 chain stitches as an interval behind it. The method on this side is identical to the starting side. In the chain circle, crochet 2 bobbles, with a 4 chain stitch interval between them. Work a single crochet into the 5th stitch, counted from right to left on top of the double crochet. Single crochet with 4 chain stitches as intervals on both sides. Continue crocheting in this manner. Finish with the last chain circle. Crochet 5 chain stitches as an interval afterward. Pick up the starting position of the single crochet below and join with a slip stitch. Then tighten slightly. No need to fasten off the yarn here. You will need to connect it later. This completes the explanation of the edging section. This completes the explanation of the first layer of the strap. Move on to crochet the second layer. Start by making the corresponding number of chain stitches. Then go back and pick up the 4th stitch from the end. Begin picking up one strand on the top of the chains. Work double crochets evenly into each stitch. Once completed, row 1 is done. Continue with row 2. Start with 3 chain stitches as the turning chain. Turn over. Pick up each stitch and work double crochets correspondingly. Finish with the last stitch. No crochet is needed at the chain stitch position. This completes row 2. Continue crocheting back and forth. Keep going until you reach the corresponding number of rows or length. Here, you can compare the width and length with the first layer. The widths of the 2 pieces should be about the same. Then crochet to match the length of the first layer piece. If there's a significant difference in width here, adjust accordingly. Adjust the number of stitches and recrochet based on the actual situation if needed. After completing, fasten off the yarn. Next, everyone should finish crocheting the second layer. Once done, proceed with joining the pieces together. Place the 2 fabric pieces wrong sides facing each other. Here for the second layer. The side with neat stitch texture in the first row is the right side. For the first layer, the side with neat edging texture is the right side. Then find a few points and secure them temporarily with yarn or stitch markers. This way, the crocheting will be more even. I have already secured it well. Now, let's start crocheting. Continue with the yarn from the first layer. First, make 1 chain as your turning chain. Here, insert the hook into the single crochet position on the first layer. For the second layer, insert the hook into the edge where the double crochet is located. Crochet 1 single crochet. Next, pick up the hole made by 4 chains adjacent to the first layer and insert the hook. On the second layer, insert the hook into the approximate corresponding position of the fabric piece. Then crochet 3 single crochets. After completing, continue. Pick the single crochet position on the first layer and insert the hook. On the second layer, pick the roughly corresponding position and insert the hook. Crochet 1 single crochet. Next, pick up the hole made by 4 chains and the roughly corresponding position. Crochet 3 single crochets. At the adjacent bobble position, pick its stitch and insert the hook. On the back, pick the roughly corresponding position and insert the hook. Crochet 1 single crochet, moving backward, when you encounter a single crochet, and bobble position on the first layer. Always pick the stitch and insert the hook. Then pull through 1 single crochet, when you encounter a hole made by 4 chains. Crochet 3 single crochets. On the second layer, pick the roughly corresponding position and insert the hook. Repeat this process, and continue crocheting downward. Crochet until you reach the edge. On the first layer, it's the position of 5 chain stitches. On the second layer, it's the position of the last row. Here, pick the front hole and insert the hook. At the back, pick the stitch of the double crochet and insert the hook. Crochet 4 single crochets. As you crochet, pay attention to hiding the final yarn tail. The crocheting method for the back side is the same as the starting side. Continue crocheting downward. When you reach the remaining side, on the second layer, it's the remaining half of the starting chain stitches. Pick the insertion point for the double crochet on this side. Insert the hook and crochet accordingly. Similarly, this is the position for 5 chain stitches. Crochet 4 single crochets. After completing, slip stitch into the starting single crochet. Pull tight. Proceed downward and fasten off the yarn. Hide the yarn tail on the wrong side. This way, the 2 layers are joined together. That concludes the explanation of how to make the strap. Next, we will attach the strap to the opening piece. Start by attaching the strap. Place the first layer facing up here, then overlap a group of stitches from the edge with the base piece. Use the working yarn from the main piece of the base piece to move downward. Sew together the overlapping area. There's no specific requirement for the method, just make sure it's secure. It just needs to be sturdy. When inserting the hook into the base piece here, pull the thread through from the same color yarn. Finally, hide the yarn tail inside the fabric. This completes the installation of one side of the strap. You can install the other side using the same method. After completing, place the opening piece downward. Position it in the indented area. For even sewing, you can mark a few points with stitch markers first, or use yarn tails to secure them temporarily. Place the edge of the fabric piece next to the base piece here. Then follow the curve downward. Continue sewing all the way to the edge of the other side of the base piece. The sewing method is the same as the assembly process. Pick the two strands from the back of the front and back pieces. For the opening piece, pick the braid on the side edge. Insert the needle and sew to secure. Here, the side edge of the opening piece needs to align with the strap position. Sew together to fix it in place. The sewing method has been demonstrated before. Continue downward to complete the installation of the opening piece. This will create the final effect like this. Lastly, make the buckle strap, and attach the magnetic clasps. The buckle strap consists of two parts and includes the edging. Start by crocheting the first part. This first part is the same as the first 5 rows of the front and back pieces. Everyone should refer to the chart to complete the first part. After completing it, move on to crochet the second part. Here, you need to continue crocheting to the left. As you go, pick up stitches along this side, and crochet 17 single crochets. The insertion points for the stitches should be evenly distributed. After finishing, keep the fabric flat. As long as there are no large gaps, it's fine. After completing, move on to crochet row 2. Start with 1 chain stitch as the turning chain. Turn over, then pick up the positions of the 17 stitches from the previous row. Work single crochets into each stitch in sequence. After completing, continue crocheting the remaining rows. From here on, crochet back and forth for each row. Begin by making 1 chain stitch as the starting chain. Turn over, then work single crochets evenly into each stitch. Refer to the chart for guidance. Crochet the corresponding number of rows as indicated. The number of rows in this second part can be adjusted based on actual conditions. Place it along the top edge of the back piece. Then align the front part with the first 5 rows of the front piece. This is where the curve is. Adjust the number of rows accordingly. After completing, proceed to crochet the edging. Chain 1 to begin. Turn over the fabric. Make sure the right side of the first part faces out. Pick up the stitches from the last row below. Work slip stitches evenly into each stitch. Then pick up 1 stitch along the edge of each row on the side. Work slip stitches into each chain space by inserting the hook and working evenly. When reaching the first part, continue picking up stitches and work corresponding slip stitches. Here, crochet 1 stitch into the center hole, where the 2 parts meet. Continue crocheting. When you reach the boundary between the two parts, work one stitch correspondingly. Continue picking up stitches on this side. At the edge of each row, insert the hook and work a slip stitch. When you reach the edge of the last row, start binding off. Slightly enlarge the loop on the crochet hook. Leave a yarn tail of about 30 centimeters here. This will be used for sewing later. Thread the yarn into a yarn needle. This completes the crocheted buckle strap. Now proceed with attaching it. Here, I'll demonstrate using this sample swatch. Place it in position according to the method used for matching rows in the second part. Make sure it aligns correctly with the previous section. That is, center it on the top of the back piece. The first part should correspond to the curvy side of the front piece within the first 5 rows. Then use the reserved yarn tail to sew along this side. First, bring the yarn up to the top edge. From there, pick up 2 strands of the braid on the back side of the buckle strap. Then pick up 2 corresponding strands from the back piece. Do not pick up any strands from the front braid. There's no specific requirement for the sewing method, just make sure it's secure. Finally, hide the yarn tail behind the buckle strap. This completes the installation of the buckle strap. Next, at the curved end of the first part of the buckle strap, locate the center on the wrong side. Attach the male part. Use the yarn from the crocheted buckle strap. Split it in half. Thread it through a thin needle. Then sew together corresponding parts. Hide the remaining yarn tail inside the fabric. This completes the attachment of the male part. Next, use a glue stick. On the opposite side that corresponds to the male part, attach half beads. If you don't have a glue gun, you can melt the glue stick with fire. Then proceed with the installation. This completes the attachment of the bead. After finishing, place the buckle strap over the front piece. Install the female part at the corresponding position. This concludes the explanation of the magnetic clasp section. Up to this point, the entire process of making the bag has been fully explained. If you have any unclear parts during the crocheting process, you can contact our customer service, Susan's Family, supporting your handwork experience, sharing the joy of life. Thank you all for watching. See you next time.